Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. At Jefferson High, the school year was in full swing. The hallways echoed with the sounds of lockers opening and closing, students' laughter, and voices rising from the classrooms. Among them was Marcus Thompson, a 17-year-old who moved with confidence but without arrogance. He was known for his exceptional intelligence and composure in the face of challenges, as well as for his natural dignity, which earned the respect of his classmates. In room 204, Ms. Whitmore adjusted her glasses and fixed Marcus with a hard, calculating gaze. A literature teacher renowned for her exacting standards, she had developed over the years a quiet but persistent resentment toward certain students, and particularly toward Marcus. His success, rigor, and self-assurance seemed to threaten her authority. That day, Ms. Whitmore had decided to cross a line. She wanted to humiliate Marcus in front of the entire class, and for her, that was a sure victory. Silence fell as the students realized that something unusual was about to happen. Their hands gripping their pens tightly, many of the youngsters could already feel the tension of an impending conflict. Marcus, sitting at the back, was reading a passage from Moby Dick, unaware of the malicious intent that was being prepared. His eyes shone with attention and concentration, ignoring Mrs. Whitmore's cold gaze, but she couldn't help but perceive this calmness as a silent challenge. Today, I'm going to show him he's not above the others, she thought with an ironic smile, convinced that no student would dare contradict her. She didn't yet know that Marcus wasn't just brilliant and respected, he was prepared to face injustice with dignity and courage. Suspense hung in the air. Every whisper, every click of a pen seemed to amplify the tension. Mrs. Whitmore adjusted her posture, ready to launch her accusation. But deep down, a small doubt began to creep in, which she immediately suppressed. She believed she was in complete control. Little did she know that by trying to belittle Marcus, she was preparing herself for the most bitter lesson of her life. The bell rang and the students took their seats in room 204. Notebooks were opened, pens began to scratch the paper, and a studious silence settled in, except for Marcus Thompson, who was rereading his literature notes. Mrs. Whitmore entered, her heels clicking on the floor, and fixed her cold gaze on Marcus. Her eyes scrutinized every gesture, every expression, searching for the slightest sign of weakness. "Marcus, can you explain to me why you always dare to think you're better than others?" she snapped, her voice full of authority and contempt. The class froze. The students looked away, uncomfortable. Even some of the bolder ones whispered amongst themselves, afraid to get involved in this confrontation. Marcus looked up calmly, without a hint of fear. "I'm simply doing my best, ma'am." Her voice was calm, controlled, but full of dignity. Mrs. Whitmore narrowed her eyes. She had expected a trembling reaction, a blush, or even a hasty apology. Nothing. Marcus showed no weakness. She stepped forward, her hands on the desk, and continued, her voice hardening. "I cannot tolerate you behaving as if you are above the rules. I will expose you in front of the whole class." Marcus sat up, slowly, but still calm. "If you think I've done something wrong, I'm ready to discuss it. I have nothing to hide." A chill ran through the room. The other students felt the tension. The confrontation that was brewing was no longer just between an arrogant teacher and a student, it represented the struggle between injustice and dignity. Mrs. Whitmore gritted her teeth, convinced she would triumph. But she didn't yet know that Marcus, with his patience and composure, would transform this planned humiliation into a lesson she would never forget. Ms. Whitmore stood at the front of the class, her gaze fixed on Marcus. Her breathing was controlled, but her thoughts were boiling. She had been preparing this humiliation for days and thought no one would stop her. "Marcus Thompson," she announced sharply, "I know you cheated on the last test." An icy silence fell over the room. Pencils stopped scratching paper, and several students sat up straight, shocked by the accusation. Some exchanged worried glances, unable to believe what they had just heard. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong and he had no intention of giving in to stress. "Mrs. Whitmore," he replied calmly, I haven't cheated at any point. You can check my work. Murmurs began to circulate in the classroom. Emily Rogers, an attentive and loyal classmate, stood up hesitantly. Ms. Whitmore. I can testify. I saw Marcus during the test. He didn't cheat. The tension rose another notch. Some students allowed themselves a small smile, relieved that a testimony had come forward to defend Marcus, but the teacher, furious, refused to admit her mistake. Silence, she shouted, slamming her fist on the desk. I will not tolerate anyone challenging my authority. Marcus remained impassive. He knew the injustice was temporary and that the truth would eventually come out. His comrades, silent but supportive, watched the scene, some impressed by his calm and dignity. Ms. Whitmore believed she was in complete control, but every word, every gesture from Marcus was slowly eroding her plan. What she had intended as a humiliating spectacle was turning into a tense moment where her own credibility was being questioned. The chapter ended with this confrontation, the class holding its breath, awaiting the next stage of this conflict which would reveal Marcus's true strength and the teacher's fatal error. The tension in the room was almost palpable. The students held their breath, watching Marcus and Ms. Whitmore like two opposing forces locked in a silent duel. The teacher, confident in her power, was already preparing her next attack. Marcus Thompson, she snapped, her tone even colder, I will not tolerate you challenging me. I am your teacher, and I am the one who decides what is right. Marcus looked up at her, calm and self-assured. Madam, I haven't done anything wrong. You can check my grades and my assignments. At that moment, Emily Rogers, a diligent and always attentive classmate, stood up. Her face betrayed a mixture of nervousness and determination. Ms. Whitmore, I can testify. Marcus did not cheat. I saw his work from beginning to end. He did nothing wrong. A murmur rippled through the classroom. The students began to whisper amongst themselves, strengthening their support for Marcus. Even some of the shyest allowed themselves a small nod in his favor. Mrs. Whitmore sensed the first crack in her plan. She frowned and stiffened. Silence, she shouted, but her voice, although authoritative, had lost its impact in the face of the growing solidarity of the class. Marcus, unperturbed, replied. Thank you, Emily. I only ask that the truth be respected. The other classmates, inspired by Emily's courage and Marcus's dignity, began to murmur words of support. The room, which had been poised to be the scene of Marcus's humiliation, slowly transformed into a space where justice and truth prevailed. Mrs. Whitmore felt her anger and frustration rising. She had underestimated the strength of solidarity and Marcus's ability to remain calm under pressure. For the first time, she realized that her plan to humiliate Marcus might fail, and that her own prejudices might cost her dearly. The chapter ended on this subtle reversal. A student expected to be humiliated became, thanks to the support of his classmates and his dignity, the figure of justice in the room. Silence hung heavy in room 204. The students, still frozen, stared at Marcus and Ms. Whitmore. The tension was so palpable that the air seemed to vibrate. The teacher, her hands gripping the desk tightly, was trying to regain control. Marcus Thompson, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed anger, I order you to remain silent. You have no authority here. Marcus, now standing, remained calm and composed. Madam, I respect your role as a teacher, but I want the truth to come out. I have done nothing wrong, and I demand that the administration intervene. A murmur rippled through the classroom. Some students exchanged astonished glances, impressed by Marcus's courage. Even Emily Rogers smiled slightly, proud of her friend. Mrs. Whitmore felt her anger rising. She had anticipated a swift and public humiliation, and now Marcus was taking the initiative, defying her authority in a civilized but firm manner. You dare to challenge me in front of the whole class, she exclaimed, her face reddened with indignation. Marcus did not waver. This is not a challenge. It is the truth. I will not seek to humiliate you, but I will not remain silent in the face of injustice. The tension became almost palpable. The students held their breath as Ms. Whitmore gritted her teeth, aware that her plan to humiliate them was spiraling out of control. Marcus, by remaining calm and dignified, had gained the upper hand, even without raising his voice. The final bell rang, a welcome relief for some, but for Marcus, it was time to take the next step, formally requesting the administration's intervention. His determination contrasted sharply with Ms. Whitmore's growing anxiety, as she began to realize that this confrontation would cost her more than she had anticipated. Thus ended the chapter. On this tense confrontation, the accused student, calm and fair, against the arrogant teacher whose credibility was beginning to crumble. The next morning, Marcus was summoned to Principal Harrison's office. The atmosphere in the halls of Jefferson High seemed heavier than usual. Every step Marcus took echoed in the silence, reminding everyone that this would be a pivotal day. Ms. Whitmore, already in the office, stood straight with her arms crossed. Her face betrayed a combination of impatience and suppressed anger. She still believed this meeting would strengthen her authority. "Please sit down," said Principal Harrison in a firm but calm voice. He observed the two protagonists seriously. "We are going to clarify this situation." Marcus sat with dignity, keeping his hands on his knees, while Mrs. Whitmore stared at the ceiling, visibly frustrated at losing control of the situation. "Ms. Whitmore," Harrison began, "I heard about the incident in class. Please explain your version of events." The teacher cleared her throat. "Marcus Thompson was accused of cheating during the last test. I felt it necessary to make him understand that," she paused, noticing Marcus's impassive expression, "that his actions were unacceptable." Marcus took a deep breath. "Headmaster, I did not cheat. Mrs. Whitmore falsely accused me in front of the whole class. Several classmates can testify to my innocence." Harrison nodded, silently taking note. "I have heard these testimonies and assessed the situation. Ms. Whitmore, your accusations were not only unfounded, but your behavior towards Marcus was inappropriate and unfair." A heavy silence filled the room. Mrs. Whitmore felt her chest tighten. For the first time, she had lost all control. The authority she had believed to be absolute had just been taken from her. "This school will not tolerate this kind of behavior. You will have to attend training on cultural sensitivity and combating prejudice," Harrison added firmly. Mrs. Whitmore swallowed hard, realizing she had just suffered a humiliating defeat. Marcus, on the other hand, remained calm, but his gaze reflected a righteous satisfaction. He had defended his dignity, and the truth had begun to be heard. The chapter ended with this decisive confrontation, the teacher's credibility shaken, and Marcus's moral strength fully revealed. A few days after the summons, Ms. Whitmore attended her first training session on cultural sensitivity and combating prejudice. Every word spoken by the trainer seemed to resonate directly in her consciousness, confronting her with truths she had long ignored. Marcus, for his part, continued his classes with his usual calm. But he knew that the most important thing was not only to defend his innocence, but also to make Mrs. Whitmore understand the real impact of her words and actions. One afternoon, Principal Harrison arranged a supervised meeting between the student and the teacher. Marcus spoke respectfully but firmly. "Ms. Whitmore, this isn't just about cheating or discipline. When you falsely accuse someone because of their background or achievements, it affects their confidence, dignity, and self-esteem. You can't imagine the effect it has on a student who is just trying to do their best." Mrs. Whitmore remained silent, unable to look away. Every word Marcus said struck her like a mirror, revealing the rigidity of her prejudices and the depth of her error. I hadn't realized," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It's not a question of achievement, ma'am," Marcus replied calmly. "It's a question of understanding and respecting students for who they are, not for who you want them to be." She felt an immense weight on her conscience. For the first time, Mrs. Whitmore understood that her authority, which she had thought unshakable, was worthless if it was founded on injustice and prejudice. Marcus's truth, expressed with dignity and patience, had shaken her world. The chapter ended on this moment of silent but powerful confrontation. Marcus, through his truth, imposed a lesson in humanity, while Mrs. Whitmore began to feel the bitterness of her own mistakes. In the days that followed, Ms. Whitmore reluctantly attended her cultural sensitivity and anti-racism training at Jefferson High. Each session confronted her with stories of humiliated students, subtle but persistent prejudices, and the lasting consequences of unfair behavior. Sitting at the back of the room, she watched the videos and testimonies, feeling a lump of shame rising within her. The images of students humiliated for their skin color or identity echoed what she had inflicted on Marcus. Each example struck her to the core, as if a mirror were held up to her, reflecting her own mistakes. During a break, Marcus walked past her in the corridor. He said nothing, simply giving her a calm but penetrating look. This simple gesture reminded her of his dignity and the silent strength he had shown in the face of her injustice. With each session, Ms. Whitmore became more aware of the magnitude of her mistake. What she had thought was a minor, inconsequential humiliation now appeared as a deeply hurtful and unjust act. She understood that her reputation as a strict teacher paled in comparison to the importance of treating every student with respect. That evening, back home, she sat alone at the table, reflecting on everything she had lost, her credibility, the respect of her students, and above all, her peace of mind. A deep bitterness had taken root within her. For the first time, she knew that her prejudices had led her to a mistake she could not ignore. The chapter ended with this painful realization: Mrs. Whitmore now had to face her own demons and seek a path to redemption, while Marcus continued to move forward, confident and dignified, despite the unjust obstacles he had faced. The weeks that followed were a transformative period for Ms. Whitmore. The training and the confrontations with the reality of her prejudices had left a profound mark on her. Each day, upon entering her classroom, she found herself observing her students with a different, more attentive, more accurate gaze. Marcus Thompson continued to work with his usual calm, and he noticed the subtle change in his teacher's attitude. Ms. Whitmore was now making a conscious effort to listen, to value the students' efforts, and to encourage dialogue rather than humiliation. One morning, while Marcus was giving a presentation on Shakespeare, Mrs. Whitmore made an unexpected gesture. "Excellent work, Marcus. Your analysis is clear and relevant. Keep it up." The class murmured, surprised by the teacher's sincere tone. Marcus simply nodded, a slight smile on his lips, acknowledging the change without making a fuss about it. Gradually, the other students also began to notice the transformation. Moments of respect and mutual appreciation emerged where previously there had been tension. Ms. Whitmore had learned to value her students' genuine efforts, regardless of their background or appearance. The change was not immediate or perfect, but the progress was visible. Marcus, through his courage and dignity, had shown that injustice could be overcome with patience and truth, and that even those who had made mistakes could learn and evolve. The chapter ended on this hopeful note: Ms. Whitmore was beginning to rebuild her credibility, not through fear or authority, but through respect and justice. Marcus, meanwhile, continued to shine and inspire his classmates, becoming a living example of dignity and perseverance. A few months later, the atmosphere in Ms. Whitmore's class had changed dramatically. The students were working with more enthusiasm, and the teacher, although still aware of her past mistakes, was doing her best to create a fair and respectful environment. One afternoon, after classes, Marcus stayed in the room for a while to put away his things. Mrs. Whitmore approached slowly, visibly hesitant. "Marcus," she began, her voice softer than usual. "I wanted to tell you. I'm sorry for what happened. I was unfair, and I treated you badly." Marcus looked at her calmly, without animosity. "Thank you, madam. I forgive you." A respectful silence followed, filled with understanding and dignity. Marcus had shown that forgiveness was not a weakness, but a strength. "But I hope you have understood the importance of respect and fairness towards all your students," he added firmly but kindly. Mrs. Whitmore nodded, deeply moved. This moment wasn't just an apology, it was a true life lesson. She understood that her prejudices had nearly ruined the life of a brilliant student and that Marcus's forgiveness offered her a unique chance at redemption. In the following weeks, this reconciliation manifested itself in Mrs. Whitmore's actions: sincere encouragement, appreciation of each student's efforts, and respectful dialogue. Marcus, in turn, continued to excel and inspire his classmates with his courage and dignity. The chapter ended on this powerful image: a student capable of forgiveness and a teacher who, confronted with her mistakes, was finally beginning to become fair and humane. A slow but genuine redemption was taking root. The big day finally arrived: Jefferson High's graduation ceremony. Families, teachers, and students gathered in the gymnasium, decorated with colorful banners and fresh flowers. Excitement filled the air, but for Marcus Thompson, it was a moment of calm and inner satisfaction. When Principal Harrison took to the stage to call out the most deserving graduates, Marcus's name echoed through the gymnasium. The applause was immediate and fueled by admiration. His perseverance, hard work, and dignity had been publicly recognized. Mrs. Whitmore, sitting in the audience, felt her heart sink. She watched Marcus receive the honors she had once tried to diminish. But it wasn't jealousy that stirred within her, it was humility. She understood then that her attempt to humiliate him had only served to reveal Marcus's true greatness and to teach her the value of respect and justice. After the ceremony, Marcus approached Mrs. Whitmore. His eyes shone with a mixture of pride and kindness. "Thank you for your efforts to change, ma'am. I know it's not easy, but I see you making progress." Mrs. Whitmore, visibly moved, replied, "Marcus, I will never forget this lesson. You showed me what dignity and moral strength truly are." The applause of the other graduates and families still echoed in the gymnasium, but for Ms. Whitmore, the most significant moment was silent: the recognition of the truth, the redemption, and the strength of a student who had transformed his teacher's shame into a lasting life lesson. The story ended on this powerful note: Marcus Thompson, brilliant and dignified, ready to conquer the future, and Mrs. Whitmore, a transformed teacher, who had finally understood that authority without justice is nothing. Truth, patience, and respect had triumphed.